Your spirit already knows the answer. Your mind is still begging for. You know that moment, staring at a decision, turning it over for the 100th time, while some quiet part of you already settled it long before your head ever caught up. There is a verse the Apostle Paul wrote to the church at Corinth, one that Kenyon leaned on again and again in his teaching. He wrote it this way, "But the natural man receiveth not the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness unto him, neither can he know them, because they are spiritually discerned." And Kenyon would stop you right there and say, "Do you see it? The mind was never built to receive this. It was built to reason from the senses, from what it can taste and touch and measure. So when you go begging your mind for a spiritual answer, you are asking the wrong organ to do a job it was never designed to do. Your spirit already has the answer. It has had it the whole time. The begging was never humility. The begging was only a habit, and habits can be broken. Say it with me. I am not begging my mind for what it cannot give me. I am listening to the spirit inside me that already knows I rest because my spirit already knows. Again, I am not begging my mind for what it cannot give me. I am listening to the spirit inside me that already knows I rest, because my spirit already knows. Again, I am not begging my mind for what it cannot give me. I am listening to the spirit inside me that already knows I rest, because my spirit already knows. If this is landing on you the way it once landed on me, subscribe now, so tomorrow's teaching finds you the moment it goes up. And if something in you just went quiet hearing that, type the words "I'm ready" in the comments right now. Let it be your seal on this teaching. The first law is this: your mind was never built to know. It was built to calculate. It takes in what your eyes have seen and your ears have heard and your body has felt, and it runs the numbers, and it hands you a probability dressed up as a certainty. But a probability is not a knowing. Think of the last time you stood in your kitchen at midnight with a decision in your hands, maybe a job offer, maybe a relationship you could not name yet, and you made a list, reasons on one side, doubts on the other, and you kept adding to both columns, hoping one side would finally grow heavy enough to end the argument. But no matter how long the list grew, something in you still felt unsettled. That is not your mind failing you. That is your mind reaching the edge of what it was ever able to do. A calculator does not get tired. It simply runs out of numbers to add, and your mind is the same. It will keep recalculating forever if you let it, because recalculating is the only trick it knows. Picture a man standing in a grocery store aisle for 10 full minutes, comparing two nearly identical jars of the same sauce, reading each label twice, weighing a difference so small it barely exists. Not because the sauce matters, but because his mind has confused thoroughness with certainty, and it will do the exact same pacing dance with a marriage, a move across the country, a phone call he is afraid to make, because it does not know the difference between a grocery aisle and the rest of his life. It only knows how to keep comparing. Now picture a GPS that has lost the signal, still speaking with total confidence, still telling you, turn here, turn there, even while it is completely lost. That confident voice is not proof of accuracy. It is only proof that the device is doing its job. Your mind speaks the same way, certain and calm, even when it is guessing. And this is why two people can stare at the exact same set of facts, the same job offer, the same diagnosis, the same broken promise, and walk away with two completely different verdicts, both spoken with total confidence, because the mind was never actually reporting truth. It was only ever reporting its own best guess, dressed in the clothing of truth. It is not that your mind is broken. It is that your mind is doing exactly what it was built to do. And what it was built to do was never enough to answer the deepest questions of your life. Your spirit does not calculate. Your spirit knows. It does not need 40 reasons. It does not run a single number. It does not compare 2 jars on a shelf for 10 minutes. It settles the matter the way a compass settles, quietly, without argument, without even raising its voice. And once you see this, you stop being angry at your own mind for spinning through the same list at 2 in the morning, because you finally understand what it is for and what it was never meant to carry. You stop asking your calculator to light a candle, and you stop asking your candle to run the numbers, each one finally doing only the job it was built for. I can measure with my mind, but I only know with my spirit. The second law is this: your spirit is not broken and waiting to be fixed. It has already been remade. Kenyon taught that at the new birth, your human spirit is recreated, given the very nature of God, not patched, not improved, but made new, the way an old house is not repainted but rebuilt from the foundation up. And this distinction matters more than it first sounds like it should, because most people move through their whole lives operating like a beggar, going door to door, hoping someone somewhere has an answer they can hand over, a verse, a sign, a stranger's advice, a book that finally says the right thing at the right moment. And there is nothing wrong with any of that. But underneath the searching, there is usually a quiet assumption that the answer lives somewhere out there, still waiting to be found, when Kenyon's whole point was that the finished work was already inside, not out there, not eventually, already. Think of a woman who spends an entire evening searching her house for her glasses, checking the kitchen counter, checking the car, checking her bag twice, growing more frustrated with every empty spot, only to realize an hour later that they have been sitting on top of her own head the entire time. She was not without the things she needed. She was simply looking in every direction except the one it was actually in. That is what it is like to beg your mind for peace about a decision, while your spirit has already settled it quietly underneath the noise. The peace is not missing, it is only being overlooked. Consider how this plays out in something as small as a Tuesday afternoon. You are trying to decide whether to take a phone call you have been dreading, and your mind runs 3 different arguments in a row, each one contradicting the last, and somewhere underneath all that arguing, there is a small, steady, almost boring sense that you already know what you are going to do. That steadiness is not indecision waiting to be resolved. That steadiness is your recreated spirit, already finished with the question your mind is still circling. It is not that you are becoming someone who knows, it is that you already are that person. The mind simply has not caught up to the meeting yet. And here is the part worth sitting with, because a spirit that has already been made new does not need to be repaired before it can be trusted. You are not waiting for some future version of yourself to arrive before the knowing becomes reliable. The knowing was reliable the day it was remade. So the real work is not fixing your spirit. Your spirit was never the broken part. The real work is simply learning to notice what has been true the whole time. And this is worth sitting with a moment longer, because so many people spend years praying for a new heart they were already given the day they were born again. They keep asking for something they are already holding, the way a man might search his own pockets for keys, while his hand is wrapped around them the entire time. He pats his coat, he checks the table, he retraces his steps to the car, all while the keys sit warm in his closed fist. That is not a flaw in the man. That is simply a mind that has not yet been told to open its own hand and look. Your spirit is the same, fully made, fully finished, fully trustworthy, and the only real task left is to stop patting your pockets and finally open your hand. My spirit was remade in righteousness. It is not guessing, it is knowing. The third law is this: there are 2 kinds of knowledge, and Kenyon spent much of his life making this plain. There is sense knowledge, which comes through the eyes and the ears and the hands, through what can be measured and reported and proven in a lab or a courtroom. And there is revelation knowledge, which comes through the Spirit, quiet, certain, needing no external evidence to stand on. Sense knowledge will tell you what the report says. Revelation knowledge will tell you what is true underneath the report. Sense knowledge will tell you what the bank statement says. Revelation knowledge will tell you what provision is still available beyond what the statement shows. These two kinds of knowing are not enemies, but they are not equal either. One was meant to serve the visible world, the other was meant to serve the eternal one. And confusion enters your life the moment you let sense knowledge sit in the chair that belongs to revelation. Picture a woman sitting in a waiting room with a folder of test results in her lap. The folder is sense knowledge, real, printed, official, and yet, in her chest, there is a stillness that the folder cannot explain and cannot erase. That stillness is not denial. That stillness is revelation knowledge, doing exactly what it was built to do. Think also of a farmer standing at the edge of a field in late winter, the ground bare, the sky gray. Every visible fact telling him nothing is growing and nothing will. Sense knowledge has a full report, and it is not encouraging, but somewhere underneath that report is a knowing that has nothing to do with what the field looks like today. A knowing built on seasons he has walked through before, on seed already planted, on a harvest that has not yet appeared but is already certain. That is revelation knowledge, standing quietly beside a discouraging sense report, refusing to be talked out of what it knows simply because the field has not caught up yet. It is not that the report is a lie, it is that the report is not the final word. I do not live by sense knowledge alone, I live by revelation. Before we go further, I want you to know there is a daily practice built for exactly this. A few minutes each morning that trains your mind to agree with what your spirit already knows. We will talk more about it before we close. Now let us continue. The fourth law is this, and it is the one that explains why the gap between your spirit and your mind ever opened in the first place. If your spirit already knows, why does it feel so far away? Why does the knowing feel like a whisper buried under static? I want to walk you through this slowly because most people never stop to ask where the static even came from. They just assume it was always there, the way you assume a room is dim without ever checking whether the curtains are simply drawn shut. First, consider that for most of your life, your mind was trained on sense knowledge alone. Every school lesson graded what could be measured. Every headline sold you on what could be seen. Every warning from someone who loved you and was afraid for you taught your mind to trust only what it could verify with its own eyes. That training runs deep. It does not undo itself just because your spirit was made new in a single moment. Think of a mind like a well-worn path through tall grass, walked so many times that the grass never grows back. Even after you plant something new beside it, your feet still remember the old path and wander there out of pure habit. That is the mind's relationship to sense knowledge, worn in by years, and it keeps walking that path long after the spirit has already cleared a better one right beside it. You can plant 100 new seeds along that fresh trail and still find your own feet drifting back to the old ruts without even deciding to. That is not betrayal. That is simply what a well-worn habit does until something patient enough retrains it. Second, consider that sin consciousness, the old sense of unworthiness so many carry without ever naming it out loud, lays a fog between what your spirit is reporting and what your mind is willing to receive. Here is where it gets personal. If some quiet part of you secretly believes you are not the kind of person good things happen to, You will talk yourself out of the very knowing your spirit is handing you, not because the knowing was wrong, but because you disqualified yourself from trusting it before it ever had a chance to land. Picture a woman named Maria sitting in her car outside a building where she has just been offered a promotion. Her spirit is calm, settled, almost quiet with certainty. Take it. But her mind starts listing every reason she is not ready. Every mistake from 3 jobs ago. Every voice from her past that told her she reaches too high. That fog is not evidence. That fog is old shame wearing the costume of caution. And it will keep dressing itself up as wisdom for as long as you let it. Notice that the fog never announces itself honestly. It never says, "I am fear." It always says, "I am being realistic. I am just being careful. I am protecting you." And that disguise is exactly why it survives so long inside. Otherwise thoughtful people, it borrows the language of wisdom to keep from ever being questioned. Third, consider the years of practice. Every time you doubted a check in your spirit and later wished you had listened. Every time you silenced a knowing because it was inconvenient to explain to someone else at the dinner table, you were training your own mind to distrust the very source that was trying to help you. This is not a small thing. This is rehearsal, and rehearsal builds skill, whether you are rehearsing the truth or rehearsing the doubt. Back to Maria in her car. She pulls out of that parking lot and drives home with the radio on, and halfway through her favorite station, the signal starts to crackle. She does not think the music stopped existing. She does not think the station shut down somewhere far away. She simply reaches over, almost without looking, and turns the dial a fraction of an inch, and the static clears, and the song comes back clean. She has done this 1,000 times. It barely registers as an action anymore, and that is exactly the posture your mind needs toward its own inner static. Not panic, not the assumption that the signal is gone, just a small, practiced turn of attention back toward what was broadcasting all along. Watch how differently she treats the two situations. In the car, she trusts the turn of the dial completely. She does not pull over. She does not call the radio station to ask what happened. She does not decide the music must have been imagined. But sitting in the same seat an hour earlier, facing a decision about her own life, she gave the static full authority. She let a little interference convince her the whole signal was gone. That is the strange inconsistency living quietly in nearly everyone. We trust the dial with a song, and we forget we own the same dial for the far more important frequency. This is the mercy hiding inside the fourth law. Static is not truth. Static is only noise, and noise, no matter how old, no matter how loud, has no authority over you unless you keep handing it the microphone every single time it speaks. Think of that radio buried under interference one more time. The clean station never stopped broadcasting for even a second, while the static played over it. It did not weaken. It did not go quiet. It simply kept sending, while the noise crowded the airwaves in front of it. Your spirit has never once stopped broadcasting. Not on your worst day, not in your most anxious hour, not on the nights when you could not hear anything but your own fear talking. The fog of sense training did not erase the signal. The old shame did not erase the signal. The years of overriding your own knowing did not erase the signal. Crowding a voice is not the same as silencing it, and silence is not the same as absence, even on the night you were most convinced you were alone with your own racing thoughts. The station kept sending, patient, unhurried, waiting for the smallest turn of your attention. The moment this actually settles in you, something shifts in the question you have been asking your whole life. You stop asking, "Why can't I hear my spirit?" as if the knowing has to be rebuilt from nothing, and you start asking the far smaller, far more useful question, "How do I turn the dial?" That question is not dramatic. It does not require a breakthrough or a mountaintop. It only requires the same small, practiced motion Maria made without even looking. A turn of attention, repeated, patient, unhurried, and the more ordinary you let that motion become, the less power the static holds over you. Because a habit repeated without drama is still a habit that changes everything underneath it. The static is not truth. It is old noise, and I am not it. If this teaching is opening something in you, subscribe now so the next one finds you. These truths build on each other, and I do not want you to miss a single layer. The fifth law is this, and it moves fast because it is simple. The bridge between what your spirit knows and what your mind finally accepts is your own mouth. Kenyon taught that words carry the knowing of the spirit into the reasoning of the mind. So when your spirit is settled, but your mind is still panicking, you do not wait for the panic to pass on its own. You speak, out loud if you can, plainly, the thing your spirit already knows. I have peace about this. I am provided for. This is not the end of my story, not as wishful decoration, but as a deliberate handoff from spirit to mind. Think of a man pacing his living room at 2 in the morning, mind racing over a bill he cannot yet explain how he will pay. And in the middle of the pacing, he stops and says out loud, "I am not abandoned." And something in the room shifts, not because the bill vanished, but because his mind just received a transmission it would not have received in silence. Notice what actually happened there. The knowing did not travel from his spirit to his mind on its own. It needed a voice to carry it, the same way electricity needs a wire before it can ever light a room. Silence keeps the knowing sealed inside you, but a spoken word gives it a body, gives it a road to walk down. This is why so many people feel the peace in their chest and still lie awake arguing with their own thoughts. They are trusting the feeling to do a job that only the mouth was built to do. So try this. The next time the panic starts its speech, do not silently hope it passes. Open your mouth and say the plain thing your spirit has already settled. Say it again if the mind talks back, because a mind can argue with a thought for hours, but it cannot argue forever with a voice it keeps hearing. I speak what my spirit knows until my mind agrees. The sixth law is this. Once your spirit's knowing starts reaching your mind, something in your posture changes. You stop begging and you start standing. Kenyon taught what he called the authority of the believer, the understanding that the spirit does not plead with circumstances the way a beggar pleads with a stranger for coins. It speaks to circumstances the way an owner speaks to a house he already holds the deed to. Think of Jesus in the boat, the storm rising, the disciples frantic, sense knowledge screaming that they were all about to drown. And he did not beg the wind to please calm down. He stood and spoke to it directly, because he was not operating from fear looking up. He was operating from authority looking down. Now walk through an ordinary day with this in mind. Morning, you wake, and the first thought is a worry about a conversation you have to have later. Sense knowledge hands you the worst-case scenario before your feet even hit the floor. But if you pause there, just for a breath, and let your spirit's report interrupt the sense report, you say quietly, I am not walking into that conversation alone. That is authority, not denial. Midday, a coworker says something sharp, and the old reflex is to shrink or to snap back. But authority says, I do not have to prove myself here. I already know who I am. That is not passivity. That is standing. Evening, you look at your bank account and sense knowledge tries to hand you dread. And authority says, this number is not the whole story. I have seen provision before, and I will see it again. None of this is pretending the storm is not there. The wind in that boat was real. The waves were real. Authority is not the absence of a real storm. Authority is refusing to beg the storm for permission to have peace. It is not that you ignore what your eyes see. It is that you refuse to let what your eyes see outrank what your spirit knows. And there is a difference worth naming clearly here between the beggar and the owner. A beggar approaches every circumstance asking permission to be at peace, hoping the situation will be kind enough to grant it. An owner approaches the same circumstance already carrying the peace, and simply informs the situation of what is already true. The storm does not get a vote in whether you are allowed to be calm. It only gets to rage or to still, while you remain the same person underneath either outcome. That is what authority actually means. Not control over every wind, but an unshakable identity that the wind cannot touch no matter which way it blows. I do not beg, I stand. My spirit has authority. The seventh law is this, and it is the deepest turn of everything we have walked through so far, because a knowing spirit and a stubborn mind can live in the same body for years, side by side, rarely speaking, unless something is done deliberately about the mind itself. Paul wrote to the church at Rome, "Be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." And notice what he did not say. He did not say, be transformed by silencing your mind, or by escaping your mind, or by punishing your mind for its doubts. He said, renew it, which means the mind is not the enemy in this story. The untrained mind is, and there is a difference between the two that changes everything about how you live with yourself from here on. First, consider what renewal actually requires. It requires recognition. You cannot renew what you refuse to notice is old. So before anything changes, you have to catch the sense knowledge as it runs. The moment the old fear script starts playing, the moment the doubt narration begins, and simply notice it, there goes the old programming again. That noticing alone is not weakness. That noticing is the beginning of authority over your own thought life. Most people never get even this far. They live inside the old script so completely that they mistake it for their own voice. They think the fear is them, rather than seeing it as an old recording, still playing on a machine that was never turned off. And once you learn to hear the difference between the recording and your actual voice, you gain something you cannot lose again. You gain the ability to say, that is not me speaking, that is only the old tape. And a tape, once identified as a tape, loses most of its authority immediately. Second, consider what renewal practices. It is not a single decision made once in a burst of emotion. It is a daily, sometimes hourly, choosing of the Spirit's report over the sense report. Think of a woman learning a new language in a country where everyone around her still speaks the old one. For months her mind wants to translate everything back into the familiar tongue, because the familiar tongue feels safer, easier, faster. In the grocery store, she still hears her own thoughts in the old language first, and has to pause and shift and reach for the new words on purpose. It is slower at first. It feels almost foolish, but every time she resists the pull back to the familiar and thinks directly in the new language gets a little more natural, a little less foreign, until one morning she catches herself dreaming in it, without ever having decided to try. Renewing your mind works the same way. Every time sense knowledge offers you its report, and you deliberately choose to think from what your spirit already knows, instead, you are not performing a trick. You are laying down a new track in ground that used to only carry the old one. Third, consider the fruit of this renewal, because it does not stay a private inner exercise forever. A renewed mind eventually stops fighting the spirit and starts agreeing with it. And when the mind agrees, the whole person moves as one, undivided, no longer a spirit that knows and a mind that argues, but a person who knows and acts from that knowing, without the exhausting internal court case that used to precede every decision. Picture the difference between a man crossing a bridge while still debating whether the bridge will hold. Every step tense, every board suspicious, his hand gripping the rail the whole way across. and a man crossing that same bridge after months of walking it safely every single day, whistling, barely noticing the water below. Same bridge, same boards, entirely different experience. Because his mind has been renewed by repetition to agree with what was true about the bridge all along. That is what is happening inside you every time you choose the Spirit's report over the sense report. You are not manufacturing a new truth. You are training your mind to finally agree with a truth that was already there before you ever set foot on the bridge. Fourth, consider how this looks in an ordinary house, not a bridge, not a foreign country, just a house you already live in. Imagine a man who inherited a home from his grandfather, every room fully paid for, deeded entirely in his name, and yet he was raised believing he was only a tenant there. So even though the deed sits in a drawer in his own kitchen, he still tiptoes through the hallways, still asks permission before he uses the good dishes, still braces for someone to tell him he does not belong. Renewing his mind does not mean getting a new house. The house was always his. Renewing his mind means walking room to room on purpose, day after day, saying out loud what the deed already says. This is mine. I live here. I belong here. Until his feet finally stop tiptoeing and start walking like a man who owns the place. That is what it is to renew a mind, not acquiring something new, but finally agreeing with what was true in the deed the entire time. And notice something easy to miss in that story. The tiptoeing never once changed the deed, not for a single day. His hesitation did not shrink the house. His fear did not shrink the property line. The ownership sat there fully intact through every anxious year he spent creeping through his own hallways, which means the years he lost were not years of lacking. They were only years of not yet agreeing, and that is a very different kind of loss. A loss of enjoyment, not a loss of possession. Fifth, consider that renewal is also a matter of what you feed the mind, not just what you refuse to feed it. A field left alone does not stay empty. It fills itself with whatever seed is blowing through the air. Weeds do not need to be invited, so it is not enough to simply resist the old sense report. You have to plant something in its place, on purpose. The same way a farmer does not just pull weeds and walk away. He pulls the weeds and then plants the crop he actually wants to see grow. So renewing your mind is not only catching the fear thought and refusing it, it is deliberately feeding it something true to replace what you just refused, hearing it, saying it, turning it over, until it starts to feel as familiar as the fear once did. This is why the same spiritual words spoken and heard again and again are not empty repetition. They are seed, going into ground that used to only grow one kind of thing, and a field planted with intention, tended morning after morning, will eventually bear a harvest that the old weeds could never have produced, no matter how long they were left to grow wild. Sixth, consider how this shows up in something as ordinary as raising a child or keeping a friendship steady. A mother spends years bracing for the worst report from the school, the doctor, the phone ringing at an odd hour, and one day her son calls just to talk. Nothing wrong at all, and her stomach still drops before her mind catches up. That drop is old sense training firing on reflex, not evidence of anything true in the moment, and she has learned, slowly, painfully, to let the fear fire and pass without obeying it, to answer the phone steady instead of already grieving something that has not happened. That steadiness did not arrive by accident. It arrived because she practiced, call after call, choosing the calmer report underneath the reflex until the reflex itself began to grow quiet from lack of use. This is what renewal looks like when it finally reaches your actual relationships. Not a dramatic breakthrough, just one phone call at a time, answered a little more peacefully than the one before it, and multiply that single phone call across 100 ordinary days, and you begin to see how an entire life quietly reshapes itself, not through one great leap, but through 1,000 small agreements, repeated until they became the new default. And here is the part people miss most often. This renewal is not slow because God is slow. It is not slow because your spirit is slow. Your spirit has been finished and settled since the day it was made new. It is slow because minds trained for years on sense knowledge take real time to retrain. Be patient with your own mind, the way you would be patient with a child learning to walk, watching her fall and get back up a dozen times in one afternoon. It is not failing you when it stumbles back into the old fear. It is only still learning to trust legs it has not used this way before. And every single time you notice the old script and choose the Spirit's report instead and feed that choice with something true, you are not starting over. You are laying one more board on a bridge that is slowly, surely becoming solid enough to walk across without a single tense step. My mind is being renewed, and it is learning to agree. The eighth law is this. All of this has to come down out of the theory and into an actual Tuesday, because it is one thing to nod along to talk of spirit and mind while you are sitting still listening to a teaching, and it is another thing entirely to live it while the coffee is burning and the phone will not stop buzzing. So let us walk through one ordinary day slowly, the way you would actually live it. 6 in the morning, your alarm goes off, and before your feet even touch the floor, your mind is already offering you the day's problems. Sense knowledge does not wait for coffee. It does not wait for your eyes to fully open. It is fast. It is loud. It has been rehearsing this opening move for years. This is the moment to pause, just for a breath, before you let it hand you the whole day's verdict. And let your spirit answer first. Quietly, underneath the noise, I am led today. 7:30. You are in traffic. Someone cuts you off without so much as a glance in your direction, and the old reflex wants to react from irritation, wants to lay on the horn and carry that heat into the rest of the morning. But you remember, I do not have to prove anything on this road. And the moment passes through you instead of lodging in you. 9 o'clock, you sit down at your desk, and there is an email you have been avoiding for 2 days. Sense knowledge tells you to imagine every version of how badly this could go. It is very creative that way, and your spirit is quietly offering something steadier underneath the worry. Not a script of what to say, just a settledness that says you will be all right when you open it, if you will only slow down long enough to listen for it, instead of drowning it out with more worry. 10:45. A small thing goes wrong. A file will not open. A meeting gets moved without warning, and normally this would be enough to sour the whole hour. But you notice yourself recovering faster than you used to. That is not luck. That is a mind that has been practicing agreement. Noon, a friend calls upset, spilling their own sense knowledge panic down the line, and rather than absorbing it as your own, the way you might have a year ago, you find yourself able to stay steady, not because you do not care about them, but because your own foundation has not been shaken loose by someone else's storm. 3 in the afternoon, tired, low on motivation, the kind of slump where the mind starts negotiating for a shortcut. Just quit early. Just let this one slide. And here is where the renewing shows its fruit, because a mind that has practiced agreeing with the Spirit does not need a dramatic miracle to keep going. It simply remembers what it already knows underneath the fatigue, and keeps walking anyway. 5 o'clock, you pass a mirror or a window and catch your own reflection for half a second. And instead of the usual quick inventory of everything wrong with the day so far, there is just a plain quiet. That quiet is the same knowing, still there, still faithful, having never once left you the entire day. 7 at night, you finally sit still. And instead of running the whole day back through a filter of everything that went wrong, replaying the traffic, the email, the friend's panic, you notice the small moments where you actually led from the Spirit instead of the reflex. And you let that be enough for one day. Not perfect, just enough. Pause for a moment right now. Actually pause and pick one real moment from your own week. One decision, one conversation, one quiet dread that sat with you longer than it should have, and ask yourself honestly, in that moment, did I consult my mind out of old habit, or did I actually listen to what my spirit had already settled? Most of us will admit, more often than we would like to say out loud, that we consulted the mind first, out of reflex, out of years of practice going the other way. And that is not shameful. That is simply where the practice begins again tomorrow morning. Notice, too, that not one single moment in that entire day required a dramatic sign from heaven, not a voice, not a vision, only a small, repeated willingness to let the quieter report speak before the louder one finished shouting, "Today my spirit leads, and my mind follows, one step at a time." The ninth law is this, and it is the quiet one that all the others have been walking toward. When the begging finally stops, what is left is not triumph, not a parade, not a burst of certainty you can show off to anyone. What is left is rest. Kenyon taught that the recreated spirit is already at peace with its maker, already settled, already home, which means the exhausting search for an answer was never actually a search for information, it was a search for permission to rest. Think of a child who has asked her father the same question 5 times in one evening, not because she doubts the answer, but because she has not yet let herself believe it is really settled. And then finally, worn out, she simply stops asking and curls up and sleeps. That sleep is not defeat, that sleep is the whole point. Or think of a man who has checked the front door lock 3 times before bed, not because the door was ever actually unlocked, but because some old habit in him needed the checking more than it needed the truth. The door was secure the first time. The 4th check added nothing but tired legs and a later bedtime. So it is with your mind circling the same settled matter, asking again and again and again, as if one more lap around the same question might finally produce a different, more comfortable answer. It will not, because the answer was never missing, only unreceived. Your spirit has been giving you the same steady answer for longer than you have been willing to admit. And the moment you stop interrogating it and simply lean into it, the way you lean into a chair that has already held your weight 100 times before, the exhausting internal argument goes quiet, not because you won some battle, but because you finally stopped fighting a war that only your own mind was staging. This is not the end of thinking. You will still use your mind for 1,000 good things every day, for planning your errands and choosing your words and building your work with care. But it is the end of asking your mind to do what only your spirit was ever able to do. It is the end of handing your deepest questions to a department that was never equipped to answer them. And here is the mercy hidden inside all of this. You do not have to manufacture the peace. You only have to stop interrupting it. The candle was never flickering because the wind was strong. It was flickering because your own hand kept waving in front of it. Be still and let it burn steady. And if you find yourself years from now still occasionally reaching to check the lock one more time, or still occasionally begging when you meant to simply listen, that is not proof the teaching failed. That is only proof you are human, and the same gentle return is always available. The candle does not resent being steadied again. Your spirit already knows the answer your mind is still begging for, and rest is simply what it feels like when you finally believe that. I am done begging. I have come home to rest. Here is the whole picture. Your mind was never the source. It was always the messenger. It is not that your mind is weak. It is that it was built to calculate and not to know. It is not that your spirit is far away. It is that it was recreated new, and has been speaking the whole time, under old static. It is not that sense knowledge is a lie. It is that it was never meant to be the final word. It is not that your mind is your enemy. It is that it needed to be renewed rather than escaped. And it is not that authority is loud. It is that it stands instead of begging. Every single law you just heard was never 9 separate keys. It was one key, turned 9 different ways. It's the same single recognition your spirit already knows, and your mind was only ever meant to agree. If this has stirred something steady in you, I want to invite you into the daily practice, a simple few minutes each morning, built to train your mind to agree with what your spirit already knows, short enough for the busiest day, real enough to change the way you meet every decision in front of you. It is available now for a small one-time price, fully guaranteed. If it does not serve you, you are welcome to a full refund. No hard feelings. You will find the link in the description below. Say it with me one last time. I am not begging my mind for what it cannot give me. I am listening to the spirit inside me that already knows I rest, because my spirit already knows. And that is the whole teaching tonight. Your mind was never going to be the one to hand you the answer. It was only ever going to be the one to finally agree with it. Your spirit already knows the answer. Your mind is still begging for. So stop begging and go listen.